The idea for this unique celebration portrait series was conceived by my colleague and friend, Dr. Dwayne Michael Cheers, coordinator of our photojournalism program. Michael undertook this incredible effort with great passion and devotion. In his own words, he sought to produce a counter-narrative that focuses on the honor and dignity of human beings, and to showcase the proud journey of 18 extraordinary and talented Black people on this campus through the lens of dignity and humanity. These tenured and tenure-track San Jose State faculty, including yours truly, were asked to reflect on why we became university professors. And we were asked to select a simple gift, a family keepsake, an heirloom, something we keep in our homes or in our offices, which helps us individually draw strength and wisdom for our proud contributions to one of the most innovative and dynamic institutions of higher education in the United States. Each portrait was taken, and then Black faculty members were briefly interviewed by Dr. Cheers. We found ourselves sharing parts of our family and personal stories and histories and traditions. Today, you will have a brief chance to hear those stories as part of this day-long effort, and you'll get a very powerful sense of who we are and what excites our souls. Many of us come from family and faith traditions which have taught us there is no such thing as a throwaway human being. Each person brings to this world unique skills and abilities that are precisely needed at certain times in our history on this planet, or in our nation, or in our community. Yesterday, in my diversity and media class, Dr. Cheers was roped into being a guest lecturer, where I asked him to talk about and give a preview of this event. And he told my students that everyone, from time to time, should be acknowledged for these gifts, compassion, dedication, and desire to make a positive difference in the lives of others. Well, Dr. Cheers, on behalf of those of us depicted in your effort today, we want to thank you for caring about us.
But welcome everyone, and I am very pleased this afternoon as we unveil a very unique portrait series, Simple Gifts, that celebrates our African American and Black faculty members. And the 19 tenured and tenure-track faculty who are featured in the photographs and video that will debut today have come to San Jose State via unique and personal paths. And they are all central to supporting student success on our campus. Studies and our own students tell us that underrepresented minority students perform better when they are taught by a diverse faculty. However, these faculty are not only role models for African American and Black students, but for all students. They demonstrate that excellent researchers, artists, and educators come from many different cultural, ethnic, and racial backgrounds. And we have renewed our commitment to fostering a culture of diversity and inclusion at San Jose State University. Welcome, everybody. And we recruit new tenure and tenure-track faculty. Academic Affairs and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion are working in tandem to ensure that we have very diverse applicant pools. I want to personally thank Dr. Michael Cheers. Along with being a photojournalism professor, is just an outstanding human being that I've had just such a pleasure to get to know. Michael, it's just been a pleasure. Last night's events were spectacular today, and I know we also have Harambe coming up this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which I'm sure many of you will be going to as well. And he's coordinated these portraits. But I also want to thank the many faculty members who participated in this project and whose videos are outside, and we'll be seeing more about them today and their stories. And I understand, as Bob said, that each of you selected a special family keepsake or heirloom from which you draw strength and wisdom. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to learn more about those keepsakes and the stories behind them. And I'm looking very much forward to the rest of the afternoon. Thank you all very much for being here.
Good morning, everybody. So great to see so many folks out to celebrate our new project, and thank you again to Dr. Cheers for bringing us all together for such a wonderful initiative. So my gift that I talk about in my video is a book. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about in the portrait, I was torn between two books. One that I read early in my career, and that was the one that I actually chose, and one that was very influential in my path to becoming a dean. So what I thought I'd do is just read a little bit from the second book that came out a few years ago, just before I became a dean. It's called Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness? What It Means to Be Black Now, by the author and cultural critic Toure. Here's the very first page, chapter one. Chapter 1 is called 40 Million Ways to Be Black. Once, I went skydiving. For about 4 minutes in 2007, I was above and plummeting rapidly toward a small town in the middle of the Florida Panhandle. Jumping out of the plane solo at 14,000 feet. I did it for a TV show called I'll Try Anything Once, in which every week I accept fear-inducing challenges. On the way to the skydiving center, the production team stopped for lunch, and at a restaurant where 3 middle-aged black men who worked there recognized me from TV and came over to our table to say hi. We got to talking, and they asked what I was doing there. I told them I was on my way to go skydiving. Their faces went cold. They were stunned. One of them said, in a conspirational tone and a volume meant to slide under the sonic radar of the white people sitting around us, said, "Brother, black people don't do that." The other two nodded in agreement. They quickly glanced at the rest of my team and then back at me as if that clinched their point. The only people doing this crazy, risk your life foolishness are some loony white boys and you. As they saw it, I was breaking the rules of blackness. A few pages later, though, he says, it was the most deeply spiritual experience of my life. I went skydiving and ended up in church. If I turned down the opportunity to skydive because black people don't do that, I would rob myself of an experience I needed to get closer to God. And who would deny me that? If I never go skydiving again, I'll always carry with me the more tangible and concrete belief in Him that I got from that day. That's a profound gift. If I'd let being black hold me back from skydiving, I would have cheated myself from the opportunity to grow as a human. To be born black is an extraordinary gift, bestowing access to an unbelievable rich legacy of joy. It'll lift you to ecstasy and give you pain that can make you stronger than you imagined possible. To experience the full possibilities of blackness, you must break free of the strictures sometimes placed on blackness from outside African American culture and also from within it. There is no dogmatically narrow, authentic blackness because the possibilities for black identity are infinite. So my thought is, as we watch this very rich set of stories, the experiences of 19 faculty, tenure track faculty here at San Jose State University, to keep that in mind. There are so many ways for us to be black and to experience black culture. And so this is just a wonderful illustration to how us keep that in mind as we go forward. So again, thank you so much to Dr. Cheers and to all of the faculty, all of my colleagues who have participated in this project. I've only been here for 2 years, but I look forward to being here for many, many years to come and to get to know our faculty in much more detail. Thank you.
How fitting that we're hosting this reception in the Student Union, which, if you know Dr. Cheers, everything about him is about the students and how faculty engage with the students. And we're in the union, which is designed as a space to bring faculty, staff, students, community members together. So we're hosting this reception in order to receive these black scholars, to receive them into this space, into this community, so that their excellence, the outstanding work that they do every day can be shared. You know, I often say that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And, you know, ironically that we're having this reception on Tuesday when on yesterday we were honoring Dr. Cheers as the co-chair for the African American Student Success Task Force. and the work that him and others have done over the last several years at the campus to make sure African American students and students across the campus are having a successful academic experience at the campus. How ironic that on Friday, this past Friday, we were hosting a reception to receive the African American scholars, the students, that Dr. Cheers had just recently taken on an alternative spring break to New York and to Washington, D.C., to give the students an opportunity to experience a play on Broadway in New York, to see The Lion King for themselves, to see students sitting in the audience and to see the giraffes and others coming out of the back of the building. If you've seen Lion King, you know what I'm talking about. To have the students in Washington, D.C. in John Lewis' office and having that personal contact with John Lewis, to be in the new library in Washington, D.C. So when you ask some faculty or some staff at this or any institution around America, and you say, how was your spring break? And some will say, oh, I feel rested. Oh, I just had a great break. I had a week off to just get my things together. And you ask Dr. Cheers, how was your spring break? He got a little more gray hair because he was gone for 8 days with 17 students, which means you got to live with them, make sure they're on the bus, make sure they're at the hotel, make sure they're at the restaurant. You know, it's that kind of thing. How ironic that just in the last few weeks, he was honored by the Silicon Valley Black History community for a Lifetime Achievement Award. How ironic the NAACP just honored him for his contributions as well. So to be here this afternoon, where we get a chance to highlight, celebrate, learn more about our colleagues, our African American and Black faculty, we don't have very many of them. So the fact that we can celebrate them as a whole community, acknowledge their presence, their contributions, the values that they bring to this campus and to this community and to their scholarly body of work is such a big deal. And I don't want us to mistake that this is something we do annually, because some will say, I don't remember getting invited last year, or I don't remember getting invited to this 2 years ago. I mean, the campus is, I don't want to say only, but we're only 160 years old. We are the first public university in California. I was teasing my colleagues at UCLA a few days ago. They were a college plant of San Jose State University 100 years ago. We've been around a while. And this is the first time we've ever done this in 160 years. So it's not all about Dr. Cheers. It's about all of the faculty that we're going to honor and learn more about this afternoon. But somebody had to lead. Somebody had to get out front and be willing to serve others. I called him last night a servant leader. Somebody who's willing to just serve first and lead second. There's some who want to lead first and serve second. But Dr. Cheers is one who will serve first. A servant leader. That makes a mighty leader and a mighty man. So congratulations to all of you. I am so excited to be here this afternoon. We are so excited to be here this afternoon to be a part of this celebration, to be a part of receiving these scholars into this community this way. Congratulations and have a great afternoon.
We're gathered here to one of the many things we're doing is witnessing the creative scholarship of Dr. Michael Cheers. With great artworks of all types, each viewer sees something different. I look at these images of strong, wise black faces, and I want to thank a lifetime of black faces who were patient with me. When I was growing up in the Congregational Church in Madison, Wisconsin, in what was then a very white town, it's more diverse now than it was then, but a very white church. Our leaders had the foresight to put us on yellow school buses, well, one bus, there weren't that many of us, and ship us to Milwaukee to march with Father Grappi and the black commandos who were marching against, marching for open housing against redlining of neighborhoods in Milwaukee. And these people that we were marching down the street with were imposing and scary, but they, you know, they taught me maybe my first lesson in a long series of lessons that, you know, it's okay to strong black people, that's all right. It's the first time I'd seen them, but it became more comfortable with every step. You know, fast forward a few years later, I'm in Chicago and I'm in a northwest suburban newspaper. I'm the theater critic. I'm going down to Chicago to cover professional theater, and I'm getting these press releases from theaters I didn't know much about because I was reading the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times. They weren't in the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times, and their addresses were like several blocks south of Roosevelt, which is south of Johnson Publishing, where Michael Cheers used to work, which published Ebony and Jet and still does. And I was getting these invitations to plays like James Baldwin's Amen Corner. And I heard James Baldwin, and I thought, well, why isn't anybody covering these theaters? And I knew the answer fairly quickly, because I didn't feel qualified to cover those plays. I felt like I didn't have the background for it. But I thought about it a little more, and I thought, well, we don't have anybody else to send. If I don't do it, who's going to do it? So I ventured down there on a dark night, and I was the only, at several of these plays, I was the only white person in the audience, and I grew more comfortable with that. And I wrote my reviews, and then I talked with people in the black theater community, and they would point out where I made some mistakes, and I got a little better over time. They were patient with me. And so, and then I interviewed a variety of people from, I think of names like Steve Carter, Chuck Smith, big names in Chicago. I also got to interview Ruby Dee and Ozzie Davis, who are more well known by, I'm sure, everybody in this room. I can't thank them, so I want to thank you all who are subjects of Michael's extraordinary portrait series. I want to thank you all for teaching ignorant white boys like me to have a conversation about race, how to recognize little acts of racism, microaggressions, how to find the words to use to point them out, to help others talk about it, teaching me to be a teacher myself who can school white students and reach out to black students, which I found I had to do when I was at the University of Missouri, because nobody on the magazine faculty there was a person of color. And there were some black students who needed, who looked a little lost. So racism most certainly is not a thing of the past. But we know, at least now we know how to have those conversations, and I feel like I know how to have them thanks to patient teachers like the ones in this series. But there's another kind of conversation that I don't think we're very good at having yet. Many of the portraits that you are going to see were taken in a tiny little room in Dwight Bennell Hall, 221B. Some of you who came through, I met some of you as you came through, because I was sitting in 221. You had to pass through 221 to get to 221B. And I was in 221 with a group of mostly young women, a couple white guys, putting together a magazine, which will come out a week from today. It's Access Magazine, and the topic this time is Women in Power. Young women today, many of them have a fierce, deep, sometimes inarticulate anger that feels to me like 1962 or 1963. They're asking, and I'm asking, where is their Civil Rights Act? Their Martin Luther King Jr., their President Obama? How do we help them find their voices, their power? I've been schooled on how to have one kind of conversation. I haven't been schooled on this other kind very well. And some of that might be my fault. Maybe I need to read more widely. But if a member of my extended family says something racist, they know I will call them out, and we'll have a talk about it. I know how to have that conversation. But when the former governor of Wisconsin, my brother's father-in-law, calls his wife gorgeous, that was his nickname for her, a nickname still used by her granddaughters. And when he says time and again, as if he's complimenting her, I didn't marry her for her brains. And half the women in the room smile as if this is true love. The other half, like my mom, grit their teeth and say nothing. Some of the men in the room begin a lifetime of similar psychic abuse. And I just sit there, mouth gaping in horror, not able to find a single word to say. When women can cook the holiday meal and then wash the dishes while the men watch football. When little girls dress up in their gauzy princess outfits and beg to be called pretty. When on any Saturday night here in San Jose, you can walk through the downtown area and see young women dressed and polished as if they're going to prom, walking next to men dressed in sweats and blue jeans. You know, as if they're going to the gym. I guess I'd like to ask this wise collection of professors who have fought a different fight, and who've also fought this one, to teach us what to say about that, because I don't know where to begin. I've been schooled, intentionally, patiently schooled, to know how to at least talk about race. I've still got a lot to learn on that front, but you know, I can be part of that conversation. I can even start it. But I feel ill-equipped to talk about sexism. And I'm wondering, I just want to plant a little seed. It's probably already there. But I'm wondering if the lessons learned from one struggle can be brought to bear on another struggle. I mean, you tell me. I'm older now, but not too old to learn from teachers as fine as these that Dr. Cheers has delivered to us with such grace. The portrait of Bob Rucker, I think, is astonishing, and that's just one of many. I thought I knew Bob. We've been friends and colleagues for a dozen years. Been over to his house, watching my Packers beat up on his Bears more often than not, which is always fun. But seeing that picture of him, I saw a different side of him. I thought, oh, I know him better now, and it's a rare photo that can do that. Most portraits of people, you look at them and say, yeah, that's the person I know. Well, I saw a person I didn't really know as well. And that's true in portrait after portrait. So I want to thank you all for your service. We need you still now more than ever. The battle lines are drawn, they're all around us. You know, it's more than sexism, more than racism, but that, you know, those are big ones. So, Michael, I want to thank you for inviting me to introduce you, for always making me think. I'm afraid I strayed a little bit from the topic at hand, but you know, part of me thinks, no, I didn't stray at all. Anyways, thank you, I appreciate this. And ladies and gentlemen, Michael Cheers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. Sounds like church in here. Well,
Preach it.
all right now, Bob, I'm going to bring it now. You know, I was working yesterday evening trying to put more thoughts together for today, on top of having to write the Huffington Post piece yesterday, wrote it over the weekend, and I was struggling with what to say today. And then last night at the celebration of our task force work over the past couple of years, Reggie Blaylock brought it home when he talked about servant leadership. I didn't necessarily see it through the things that I have tried to do. What first came to me was what Cornel West once said. He said, "You can't lead the people if you don't love the people. And you can't save the people if you don't serve the people." And that's something that's always been with me. Servant leadership. I was patiently schooled after 3 degrees at Boston University, but patiently schooled at the University of Johnson Publishing Company in Chicago by some black folk, John H. Johnson, Robert Johnson, Lerone Bennett, who welcomed me as a 23-year-old young man who had a lot of book knowledge. But they said, "Well, we're going to do something else for you. We're going to put you out there. And what I want you to do is I want you to see and observe." And going throughout the South for many years and all across other parts of the country and then the world, I found myself at that intersection of black thought and identity. And Dr. Deborah Griffin, I can't leave that spot. I've been there for some 30 plus years. It's something about working at the intersection of black thought and identity that just will not leave my spirit. And there are 2 books that I just keep, and I pull them out all the time. One is Langston Hughes's Sweet Fly Paper Life. This is an original copy. I paid like over $500 for this about 20, 30 years ago. I found it. Roy D. Carver and Langston Hughes. And the other book, 20-something years ago, was my friend that I talked about in the Huffington Post article, Dr. Deborah Willis at NYU wrote the book Picturing Us. And that's where I really draw a lot of what I try to do. And it was easy getting into this project for a number of reasons. I remember pitching it to the dean, and I'm thinking he's gonna come back to me and say, "Brother, please, these folks ain't gonna, But he didn't. He said, "Well, let's do it. Let's try to do it. Let's do it." And the dean got behind me on this project. Almost took the entire academic year. But I learned more from y'all. And just being welcomed into your space. Hearing Angela Rickford talk about the clothes that her mother sewed with love from infancy up to and including her wedding dress. And even more than that, she's from Guyana. When she came here, she and her husband only had $100. But somehow they found a way to not only raise 4 beautiful children, but husband went on teaching now at Stanford, and Dr. Rickford here. It was amazing tales. Bob Rucker's timepiece. I agree with Scott. I thought I knew Bob, but to sit down and have him articulate that story. I learned about Slick Ike and his bike. A brother who used to pop wheelies in the neighborhood, and who would have thought that that would have triggered Stan Butler's love for cycling and turn it into a career and an EDD and a professorship in kinesiology. My frat brother, Dr. Stephen Milner, when he pulled out that picture that he had taken with Rosa Parks in 1980. Amazing, amazing. And the story behind it still stays with me. And then, of course, there's the Bibles. When Dr. Marilyn Easter talks about the Bible, and when she talks about the 23rd Psalms, y'all need to get not only into the Word, but y'all don't have to go home and find your family Bible. Go to your, if you don't have a Bible on your Google, just Google the 23rd Psalms and read it. And you'll begin to understand the strength from which she draws her wisdom and that which sustained her. And when she pulled the rose out of the Bible, the one that she removed from her mother's breastbone before they lowered and closed the casket. Come on, y'all. The figurine. Can you imagine having never seen a black figurine of a black teacher? And Marquita Bird found it, and she said it was her price, $3.65. I thought she was going to say $365. She said it was $3.65, but she would have paid whatever because she had never seen a figurine of a black person. Jason Douglas, who had to leave to teach his class, but when he came into the studio with cufflinks and the beads, and he talked about from not only his heart, but he went to his soul and talked about the love of his then fiance who stood by him when he was working on that PhD. For some reason, something about a violin. Mortgage $50 a month. Family, raising 7 kids. But the daughter wanted to learn how to play the violin, but somehow, somewhere, Reggie Blaylock, Daddy and Mama found $5. So Ruth Wilson could learn how to play the violin. And I'm going to just pause here for a second to say how much we honor all our people. But we know that Dr. Ruth Wilson is going through some health challenges, but that sister is here today, you all. She's not teaching this semester, but she's here. Dr. Wilson, we honor you. Monica Allen talks about these letters that she used to write, and these to her grandparents, and the clothes that her grandmother used to always make sure that not only her but her siblings always had a new outfit for graduation. That stuff takes you back, y'all. You know, that's such rich content. Simply, y'all, that's what I do. Somehow, Dr. Blaylock, I found some strength in a camera that for me went on to become that choice of weapon that Gordon Parks talked about, where he got his strength and wisdom. And Gordon Parks would welcome me, call me, critique my work, invite me to his house. And he cooked me fish dinner. And he would want to know, Michael, how you doing? Let me see your work. I want you all to really absorb these stories, this rich content. By 1819, souls and the things that they have shared. We come from a place, we come from a space, we didn't always have it. Didn't always come from high society. You know, a lot of us came up the rough side of the mountain. Sing that in church all the time. This is my gift, Dr. Deborah Griffin. This is my gift to our people. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Nikki Yaboa, and I'm a professor in the Department of Communication Studies. I've been teaching there since August 2016. I'm a new assistant professor here. My area of research actually is oral history performance. Oral history performance is when you conduct interviews with people in communities, and then you engage those interviews not just through scholarship, but also through performance. And I think this is really important in the communities I deal with specifically because I take the stories and the histories of Black communities, people of African descent, so either African Americans or Africans from the continent. And I use performance as a way of allowing them access into scholarship, into what is being written about them and what is being said about them. So I am from Ghana, West Africa. At least that's where I was born, but I was raised and spent most of my life in Canada. It wasn't until my PhD that I actually moved to the States, lived in Chicago for a while. I acquired my PhD at Northwestern and moved here just recently in August to begin my career. This scrapbook that I have in my hand is actually the scrapbook that started my passion for and love affair with oral history. So I came across this scrapbook by accident, actually. I don't remember exactly how I discovered it, but it was within my mother's possessions. And there are a series of pictures that she put together when she was in high school. And I remember being blown away, because I was in high school when I discovered it. And I remember being blown away at the concept that my mother had ever even been in high school. So of course I started asking her questions. Who's this person? What's that person? Why did you write this here? I think one of the pages says, Black is beautiful. Why was that important to you? Who were your friends? What did you guys do? It opened up a space for me to think about her differently than just her role as my mother. And so this actually was the very first oral history that I conducted. And my mother's stories actually still very much influence the type of scholarship that I'm attracted to, the kind of scholarship that I do. I look at stories of Black migrants, which my mother was. She is probably the most well-traveled woman I've ever met. She's been all across West Africa, first as a trader, lived in Europe for some time, moved with me to Canada, the States, Nigeria. With her, I've seen half the world. And without her, I've continued the journey on my own. But I'm very invested in stories of migrant Africans, which many people of African descent, we can consider ourselves migrants, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. And also, I'm interested in women's stories. So I don't look exclusively at that or specifically at that. I find their stories to be engaging. I find their stories to present a different view of cultural identity than what mainstream or popular discourses show. So my research is important to me in two ways. I see my research as both a personal journey and also a professional one. So in terms of where I see my research going on a personal level, I think it's really important that as a Black person, as a person of African descent, and as a Ghanaian who left my country when I was 7, moved first to Canada and now to the States, that I maintain the connections that only history can provide me with my past. And so the more I conduct oral histories with other Black people, the more of a sense of an identity that I personally start to kind of accumulate. Identity comes out of culture. You don't just create identity on your own. And so I find that my research opens me up to thinking about all the ways in which Blackness is and Blackness lives. And so in that sense, the journey that this research has taken me on has been deeply personal and deeply satisfying. And on a professional level, I'm really committed to making sure that the types of scholarship I produce makes its way back to the communities I take the scholarship from. I think traditionally the academic model has been you go out into the field, you conduct ethnography or interviews with people in the field, you take all that knowledge back and then you squirrel it away in an article or a book that only other people that are academics can have access to. There's nothing wrong with that model. Scholarship is important, right? But especially in communities like our own, where we're used to knowledge being taken from us, it's nice to be able to return that knowledge, to show people that they are co-creators in their lives, to show people and to demonstrate just how important the things that they're saying and doing are. And so professionally, performance becomes a way for me to achieve that. Scholarship is important and necessary to my tenure, obviously, but being an oral history performance scholar has enriched my professional life by giving it a sense of politics, a sense of my politics, the politics that I'm invested in.
So Eros, the name that's engraved on the drum over here, that is short form of Erogbogbo. And now that's the family name. Everyone uses Eros. Everyone from my aunts, my uncles, my grandfather. There's even a nickname of Eros on top. There's a saying, Maburu Konyeje, which means don't spoil the name. So we try to keep and preserve the Eros name because, we have people, congressmen, high power and high profile people with the name. They've worked very hard to establish themselves. Now, my great-grandfather, his name is Alhaji Suleiman Erogbogbo. He was the first Erogbogbo. Erogbogbo means all thoughts. And he was known around the community for advising other people and tried to help them solve their issues. He normally believed the basis was financial. One of his children is my grandfather. That's Alhaji Ashafa Erogbogbo. I'm named after him. Alhaji Erogbogbo sacrificed his education to raise his kids. He had 3 children at the time, and he could not go abroad. He had the chance to go abroad to get an education, but he had to stay behind to raise his children and build his family. So he has always wanted that education, and I'm named after him. So I'm very proud that I got his first and last name, and I was able to earn the degree he was unable to earn. Now, the drum is something we used to celebrate and bring together everybody in Nigeria. I've used this drum in my grandfather's 90th birthday. I played for my grandmother's 80th birthday, my aunt's 50th birthday, and it's something that's generally popular amongst Nigerians. Even my father played in school when he was young. So I've picked up that gift and translated it and preserved it, and I take it to physiology for engineers class. I take the drum to teach about the eardrum. The eardrum has a membrane called the tympanic membrane, and that membrane vibrates with different frequencies in order for you to hear sound. And you have these little bones called ossicles, called the malleus, incus, and stapes, and I try to connect the students to the ear using the drum. And I preserve the name, and I preserve the drum, and I take it with me wherever I go.
My name is Faustina Ducross. I'm a sociologist. I'm interested in the ways in which Black identities have been constructed in different places in the United States. And I was really inspired by my family's history. They were Black Creoles that moved from Louisiana to California in the 40s. They were part of this great migration that continued over that time, and they were part of a really tight-knit community. I started to develop my project by interviewing my grandmother, and I used this recorder to do several hours of oral history interviews to get her sense of what it was like to be in this community during that time. And after that, I really was able to get a context for what was happening in the Black Creole community in Los Angeles during that period. And I did almost 50 interviews. And the time with my grandmother really was powerful for me because we just got to sit and talk, and I was able to listen without everyone else in the family around and be able to ask questions about her experiences and growing up in New Orleans, how the family decided to come to LA, and what it was like to raise family in the Creole community in Los Angeles at that time. The research that I've done with the Black Creole community in Los Angeles is really a jumping off point for me. I'm going to be looking at the community in the Bay Area and really kind of weaving that together. I had family that came up here to the Bay Area also, so I wanted to see how that is similar and different in the ways in which the Black community integrated the migrants and what was their experience, how did they make home, how did they connect to Louisiana. And I really bring that into my classes. When I teach my race and ethnicity classes, I talk about the history and the legacies of segregation, what that's meant for generations after. My African American Studies classes, we really talked about the Great Migration in terms of the impact that had in terms of movement in such large numbers and how communities kind of arose out of that. The current articles that I've been writing have really been a focus on the ways in which the Black Creole community made connections to home. One of the ways that they did that was through the Catholic Church and the parishes in Los Angeles. And I grew up hearing about the parties and the school functions and the Mardi Gras fundraisers that happened all in the Catholic parishes. And I really got a sense of that with my research, that it was really one of the key ways that migrants connected themselves and their community in Los Angeles to back home. And I also was able to get a sense of how the second generation who I interviewed, who grew up in Los Angeles, like my dad, my aunts and uncles, how they also connected to Louisiana, even though they were mostly raised in Los Angeles. And lots of the folks that I talk to think about Louisiana as kind of like a homeland. It's part of their identity. It adds to their identity of being Black, and it also helps to explain sometimes who they are in the context of the way our country's racial hierarchies get understood. Lots of times people don't know that they're Black necessarily by their name. They might think they're Caribbean, they might, think they're from Latin America, but connecting to Louisiana is a way for them to kind of claim that Black identity that's grounded in the history of the U.S.
So my name is Jason Douglas. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Studies. And, just a little bit about, the type of work that I do, the research that I do. A lot of it actually stems from my background and, my upbringing. I do research on public health and environmental justice. And, I'm concerned with, how certain communities, low-income communities and communities of color are being treated and how public health outcomes are unequal coming out of these communities. So, taking that was a growing interest throughout my life, throughout my, coming up to my graduate studies. And it's something that it is a very challenging field to study, as well as, just doing a PhD program. There's so many challenges that we go through. So just taking a very challenging topic and a very challenging course of study, I needed to find strength to be able to accomplish my goals. And a major source of strength for me is my wife, Emily. She's been with me from day one of that PhD program. We actually met maybe 2 months before I started my PhD, and I was very excited. I was hot. I thought I was great. I was going to go into this program and do some amazing work. But, as we all know, having gone through it, there are going to be a lot of challenges. The reason that I wore these links today, these are the cufflinks that I wore at mine and Emily's wedding. M for Emily, that's what we all call her, M, and J for me. It's because she was the source of strength. She helped me to get through that PhD program. She was supportive of me the entire way through, everything that I wanted to do, every turn that I made, she supported me 100%. When I told her, I'm going to do my dissertation in Jamaica, and I have to be there for months at a time, on and on. You're not going to be able to do this with me. She didn't like it, but she supported me. She said, you know what, this is what you got to do. This is something that you're passionate about. You're passionate about working with communities in need, communities that are being treated unequally, and you need to pursue that. So she helped me get through that. She helped me get through biggest challenge. During my PhD, my mother passed away. That was in 2009, and that was a blow. She and I were very close, and I think I would have fallen apart, if I didn't have Emily there at that time. And I guess it's no coincidence, having gotten through that together, well, maybe 6 months after she passed away, I went and purchased an engagement ring and asked her to marry me. I said, you are the person that I know you'll always be there for me. And together we can succeed in anything. And so far we've been getting there. I finished that PhD program. I went right into a postdoctoral research fellowship. That was at Loyola Marymount University. I did my PhD at CUNY, the Graduate School and University Center, then my postdoc at Loyola Marymount, and then came to my faculty position here. And we've taken that journey together. My wife, she also was pursuing an advanced degree, a master's degree in school counseling to be a socio-emotional counselor. At the time, she was teaching mathematics. And she really wanted to, I guess we're very much like-minded. She wanted to work with people. She wanted to work with people firsthand and help them to work through some of the issues that they're struggling with. So we did these things together, and she succeeded. She completed that, and she is now she is the socio-emotional counselor at her school in Los Angeles. And she's doing it, she's killing it. And through all of that, we had a wonderful baby girl. Her name's Brooklyn. And, named after where my wife and I met and fell in love, where it all started. So we brought that baby girl into this world, which is why I brought the beads, as an enduring symbol of what I'm trying to accomplish, what my wife is trying to accomplish in her work, is, bringing about a respect for diversity, a respect for inclusiveness, equal access to resources for all people, irrespective of what you look like. Race, class, gender, where you come from, what language you speak. Our daughter is Brooklyn. She's all colors of the rainbow. She's got everything going on in her. And for us, she represents the future. And she's another, again, enduring source of strength to forge forward and say, this is what before we were doing it, because this is something that we believed in and we still do, but now we have even more of a reason. So that little girl has a better world to grow up in.
I am Constance Deanne Hill-Williams. I'm an assistant professor here in the Valley Foundation School of Nursing. I have been here for almost 5 years. In August of this year, it'll be 5 years. And the picture I brought in today is a picture of my mom and my dad. My parents met in 1962 at a university, Langston University, which is a historical black college located in Langston, Oklahoma. And Langston was started in 1897, a part of the freedmen for the free blacks that were moving during their navigation to outward west. And it was established as a teaching university. I was excited to bring in this picture because this picture was actually shot on their honeymoon in 1965. And my mom actually was, I was conceived during their honeymoon here. And this picture is where my parents are standing by a rock, but later did I find out that my parents are standing by a rock in San Francisco. I'm not originally from San Francisco. I was born in Oklahoma, transferred over and pretty much grew up in the Chicago area. And then a couple of years ago, I met my husband, and he lived out here already, and so I moved out here. So I look at it as being a full circle type of aspect, that my parents traveled here for their honeymoon and everything over 50 years ago, and here I am today actually residing in this area. The picture means so much to me because family was really huge and significant in my life. Often when you think of the African American family, you think of maybe of a single parent household, where there have been some awesome, strong women who have raised the children within that household. But I was very blessed to grow up with a very nucleus family and then extended family who had marriages intact. And so I saw the proof that marriage can work, and through my parents, their longevity, through many hardships, through many different changes, they were overcomers. And I also look at them because they were what came out of the civil rights movement as well. My parents often shared with my siblings and I their stories of participating in the civil rights movement in Oklahoma. Yet Oklahoma was further west. There was a lot of discrimination. Many of you might have even heard of the Tulsa situation of Wall Street, the Black Wall Street. I have many relatives that were living during that time. They came through that. All of my family, after they migrated from Mississippi, moved on both sides to Oklahoma. So they have learned of that, and they had firsthand experience of engaging in some civil rights activities, such as sitting in at the Walgreens in Oklahoma City and participating with Clara Looper, who is a well-known civil rights activist. She is now since deceased, but during that time, who led many of the student sit-ins throughout that state. So I look at them as historical figures in my own rights because they overcame a lot. My mom in particular grew up in a small town called Spitzer, Oklahoma. She was the first of her family to receive a college degree as she went to Langston. What's very unique about my dad is that, and I thought this was just commonplace, my grandfather had his master's degree and he received that back in late 40s, and he got that at Oklahoma State University in agriculture. And so he comes from that lineage, and then here I am now, fourth generation of the, actually I take that back, third generation of a college student, but I have superseded my parents and then my grandparents' expectations of getting my doctorate about 3-4 years ago. So that to me just shows the progression of what the true tenets or foundations can do for an individual. And so that's why I like that picture, just because of the fact that it shows the unity and the growth and expectations, how they could supersede. So my research interest originally started off with young people who acquired HIV at birth. My dissertation focused on that generation because they were the first generation who was reaching adulthood. And nobody thought that these young people would ever make it to adulthood, including themselves. So now we have a group of individuals who are now adults with a chronic illness. It has now been labeled a chronic illness, HIV, and they want to have life. And so I thought what better way to understand that was to give them a camera. I gave them a camera and an opportunity to do the photo voice method, which was to describe what they envisioned their adulthood to be like. And so many amazing facts came out of it. One of the things is that they said is they never wanted to be known as HIV does not define me. It's not who I am. They had names. They had ideas and dreams and aspirations, which was huge. Most young people that have been impacted truly in this country by HIV have been those of African American background. So often if you read in the literature, you would hear that they come from really broken down family units, crack, prostitution, all types of the worst urban ills that you could think of. I found what was very unique with my small sample size that this was contradicted with the young people I had. One was already in nursing school and she was headed to become a nurse practitioner. I had another young man who was also in school, got a full ride to a school in Nebraska, headed to become a lawyer because he wanted to be an activist. So many of them were doing great things. Often they have talked about wanting to have families. So what did that look like? How were they going to do that? And one young lady in particular, she already had a child who was HIV negative. So I wanted them to have an opportunity to tell their story through the lens, but then also to write their story in narrative and to put it on display. So I had an opportunity at the University of Chicago to open it up to the people that they wanted to disclose it to, and even invite some of the stakeholders in the community that can make a difference, such as lawmakers, and that they came in and they were able to display their work. So moving forward, yes, I would love to do something similar. I do a lot of work over in Africa as well, in Kenya. I have a nonprofit called Unity that goes to Kenya and Zimbabwe. And when I was in Kenya, they said because of the antiretrovirals that they have received in there, they're believing that they're going to see a lot of their people. So I thought it would be fascinating to see would there be some common themes that would emerge with their young people in Nairobi, and then also with the young people here in Chicago as well. Moving forward, I'm really interested in emerging adults. And emerging adults are those individuals who are 18 to 29 years of age. Because these are the millennialists, this is our future, this is our future workforce, this is our future everything. And so I want to do more research with them just to see what excites them, what scares them, what are their thoughts, and how do they see themselves progressing through adulthood.
So these are pictures of my grandparents, and they were so important in my educational journey. I was so blessed to be born into the family that I was born into. I was born with all of my natural grandparents, plus my parents, step-parents, and even great-grandparents. Educating their children was an important job for my parents, and all of my grandparents were so supportive in that. My maternal grandmother had a college degree, and she was born in Virginia and educated in New Orleans, in Louisiana. So this was a time and a place where women, particularly black women, weren't being educated. So she was such an inspiration to us as we were growing up and as we were getting our own educations. My other grandmother, every time it was time for one of us to go to college, would get a big box and fill it with sheets and blankets and pillowcases and towels and all the things that we needed for our dorm rooms. And so one of the exciting things about going away to college was to see all the wonderful stuff that she would pack into that box for us and ship off to our dorms for us to be ready for college. My paternal grandfather had me write him letters regularly during my undergraduate program, telling him everything that I was doing and everything that was going on with me. And that was very motivational for me because I obviously wanted to report only good things and successes in my letters to him. And he used to talk to my mom about how much he appreciated getting them and hearing what was going on with me. My great-grandmother made it her job to make sure that all of her grandchildren, all 5 of us, had a new outfit every time we had a graduation. So from kindergarten all the way through college, we always had a new outfit from her for our graduations. And these pictures are important because these were taken the day that I got my master's degree. And every one of my grandparents, including my great-grandmother, is there for that really important day. I'm the first person in my family to get a master's degree, and this was the last time we were all together as a family. None of my grandparents lived to see me get a doctorate, but their spirit of love and inspiration and support is never far from me, and every educational and professional achievement I have is as a result of standing on their shoulders. So I always think about the advice that they gave me, the support that they gave me, and I want to provide that support not only to my own children, but to my students. And one of the main, I think, accomplishments that I can have as a faculty member here is to provide that same level of support. You know, when you know that people are behind you and you know that people are supporting you, it changes the way you move through the world. It gives you a sense of self. It gives you a sense of purpose that I think you don't have if you don't have that base of support. And I want to try and be that same base of support to the young people in my life, not only my kids, but to my students as well.
I entered graduate school 1993, sociology, Indiana University. Before that, I was a major in electrical engineering, Georgia Tech. I'd never taken a sociology class, but it was after I graduated and started just reading on my own and I got really into sociology books. So when I went to graduate school, I expected to have that same passion, but that first semester, it wasn't the same. It wasn't until I discovered this book in my second semester that kind of reignited that passion that I had. Like, okay, I'm in the right place. So Racial Formation in the United States, Michael Omi and Howard Wynett just really kind of verified my love of sociology, especially for race and ethnic relations. It gave me a really good sense about our experience as African American people, what we had to do to survive in this land and to advance. So after I read this book, I'm like, I'm going to use this book when I start teaching. So I started teaching 1995. This was definitely one of the first books I used for my class on race and ethnic relations. Students found it very powerful. They kind of gained a lot of insights about how race works here in the U.S. and what they could do to kind of combat it and make things better for all people, of course, but also our people as African Americans. So I always use this book in all my race and ethnic relations classes. I haven't taught in a while, but I still check this book out from time to time. Still gives me insights. In 2008, I think it was, I actually met Michael Omi, one of the authors. So he signed the book, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Meeting one of my kind of mentors from afar. So even though I haven't really taught in about 5 years, haven't taught this particular class in over 10 years, still very relevant today. So, I don't teach much anymore, but as an administrator, one of my jobs is to try to figure out ways in which we can definitely enhance student success. So that's supporting, instructors in the classroom, but it's also looking at extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities. For instance, our students recently went on alternative spring break. They went to New York City, Washington, D.C., visited Harlem, visited some of the historically black college university in D.C. area, went to the new museum, Smithsonian Museum on the mall. Really powerful experience for those students. So I was happy that in the College of Social Sciences, we were able to find some scholarship money to help the students. So we had 7 students in the College of Social Sciences that went on the trip, and we were able to give each one of them $500. So my job as an administrator is to find funding to help these students in terms of scholarships, programming. Again, another thing we're very excited about is the new Black Scholars Community over at one of the residence halls. So Professor Nikki Uboa is the professor in my college, and she's the faculty in residence for that particular program. So I just love being able to support faculty and students and trying to have very rich experiences here at San Jose State University. Now, I think it's very important that San Jose State University continue to recruit and retain African American faculty and administrators for a couple of reasons. One is to have mentors in the classroom so that African American students see somebody in the classroom that they can relate to, so somebody who understands their experiences, who could also be a role model for other students as well, not just African American students, but for white students. To have a person of color as an authority in the room, as an expert, I think is very powerful. Second, it's also important to have more faculty and staff be available for mentoring roles outside of the classroom. So we have the Black Male Mentoring Movement, for instance, which was started by Jamal Williams, one of our excellent, talented, staff members. So it pairs up faculty and staff with our African American men. So having more people who are available to serve in that capacity is really important. And one final thing I mentioned is for administrators of color, especially African Americans and other administrators, it's really important to be, in those halls of power, to be able to affect change, to when a proposal is made that may adversely affect students of color or students in general. It's important for people to have those alternative perspectives, to be able to speak up and say, hey, let's rethink this. Let's come up with a plan that might be more beneficial, more powerful for our students.
And
Dr. Milner, tell me about the photo.
Well, the photo was done in the winter of 1980, 6 days after Mrs. Rosa Parks' mother had passed away, and her funeral was very much on Mrs. Parks' mind. So I was grappling with dealing with her sadness, as she also had to recall the sadness of the Montgomery bus boycott. So it was a rather challenging day and afternoon, but Mrs. Rosa Parks was a trooper. She moved through the interview. She shared details with me about her mother's life and her mother's impact on her that she hadn't talked about publicly for years. And that interview turned out to be one that would be reprinted in numerous other studies, and it really was a turning point in my career. In many respects, it made my career. Okay. Because it got published in a collection by a Pulitzer Prize historian named David Garrow. And I still, see citations from that study in contemporary books about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Tell me about, at what stage of your career were you? Were you an assistant professor somewhere? Were you still a graduate student?
I was still a graduate student at UC Berkeley, and I was struggling because I was a father and a husband, and I was taking time away from family, but I had to get to Detroit to finish off that project, and I knew I had to get Mrs. Parks before her handlers surrounded her so much that she would not cooperate with struggling graduate students like myself. I had already encountered some personalities, I'll not mention names, who expected $500 before they would sit down to do an interview. So Mrs. Parks was generous beyond belief. She was generous with her time, just as she had been generous with her spirit and her life in giving so much to the movement. Rosa Parks was no novice to activism. She had been a member of the NAACP in Alabama going all the way back to the early 1940s, during a time when black people joined the NAACP in that state. Their names were published in the local newspapers so that retaliation and intimidation could be directed toward them. And Mrs. Parks had overcome that kind of fear long before she refused to give up her seat on December the 1st, 1955. And of course, I knew all that. And one thing you learn about being a researcher is the more preparation you engage in before you meet your subject, the better your interviews and your findings can be. So that was a key to how I was able to frame questions for Mrs. Parks that she hadn't been asked before.
How long did it take for you to get the interview? I can imagine it was obviously through telephone calls or letters.
I had spent the summer of 1977 doing a lot of work in Montgomery, Alabama, and I would talk to and interview and tape people who had been veteran activists, because I wanted Mrs. Parks to be my final interview, because I wanted to know everything I could about the movement and about what people had known of her and what she had done before I actually sat down with her. But then I had to go through layers of handlers before I could actually get to Mrs. Parks.
And the interview was done where? You said in Detroit, but in her home?
It was done in a senior home where she had lived with her mother in her declining months. So it was right on Woodard Avenue. And Woodard Avenue by 1980 was really beginning to be a tough place to get through. And I had taken a hotel room on East Jefferson, and I walked about 40 blocks to where Mrs. Parks was. And I was wearing a coat, and I would notice that some of the guys would drive by on Woodard Avenue, and they spotted me with my coat, and they were getting ready to take me off.
Right.
But it just so happened that I turned into where Mrs. Parks was staying as those guys were noticing, that I had a coat that they could pawn or something like that. So it was quite an adventure.
And what has that picture meant to you? Because you mentioned that it still is on your desk. And so what inspiration, I guess, has it continued to be for you over the years and throughout your academic career?
That picture was with me when I was in a group of about 5 or 6 young African Americans who were in the first wave to integrate the University of Mississippi in 1982. I took that picture with me and I set it on my desk when I was down at Ole Miss, and I would look at it on many occasions because we went through some stuff at Ole Miss in 1982, taking on the issue of the rebel flag that tried my last nerve. But over the course of a year, I was a BSU advisor. The students at Ole Miss were successful in getting the university to officially disassociate themselves from the rebel flag. And they actually did it in the year 1982.
Okay.
But once that was publicly announced, within a matter of about 3 weeks, the Mississippi Klan visited the campus and marched all over the campus, demonstrating their outrage that the flag that they had embraced for so many decades had been publicly disassociated from the university. Those kinds of things, were things that characterized early years of my career.
And did you ever get a chance, because if you're talking about the 80s when you were at Ole Miss, that's only 20 years after James Meredith.
It was exactly 20 years after James Meredith had integrated. And some of the best people that I have worked with in my life were at the University of Mississippi during those years.
Did you ever get a chance to meet James Meredith?
I met James Meredith on numerous occasions, but the James Meredith that I met in the 1980s was much different than the one who had, been around in the 60s. And that is no real surprise, because I met a lot of veteran activists who had been, in many ways, brutalized and mutilated by the pressures of those times. But, war veterans, because that was a war for transforming this nation and bringing us toward modernity.
One, it was my mother and my father, and they worked as a team up until the time of his death at age 89. So what he couldn't do, she would take, she was a beautician, and she had some income coming in here and there, and she would do. And she was very muchly so proud of her 7 children and her husband, and she wanted the best for us. And that meant her doing everything she knew to do, and then some things she didn't know that people advised her to do. So one thing was, help out, where you can. You pay the $5 that month and what have you. If you need to, there weren't enough ladies coming in for their hair, get their hair done. Well, you might be able to do some housekeeping for somebody. So she was always looking for ways to help my father support our family. And that included this incredible vegetable garden that she taught us to maintain. From an empty lot that was across the street, she saw that as food production, and she called the landowner, whose name was on the rental sign, and got permission to keep the lot. In a city, you can't have wild grass just growing every place because you get fined. She promised to keep the lot mowed and everything, and he wouldn't have to come into the absentee landlord. He wouldn't have to come in to do that. And we kept that lot taken care of because she decided to do gardening. And as an excellent horticulturalist, she taught us in the process. So it was like that. When something needed to be done, and my parents agreed on it, my mother and father found a way out of no way and got the business taken care of. And that was just true, not just for me, but anytime there was a need in the family, their nuclear family as well as their extended family, their church family, their community family, they worked together to help people. And when I see the benefit of long-term investing in people, you're never alone, no matter what you're going through. And it taught me a lot about how to build my own community when I left home. Well, one thing I learned is the external, what you see externally in a person is not necessarily who they are. That's a part of it. But to be willing to take the time to listen and say hello and develop relationships is really, really, really important. Even if it's just the person you say good morning to every day, it has meaning to people. And when it's time to get something else done, they remember those things that, you saw them as a human being who needed recognition. Just a good morning really makes a difference to a lot of people. You never know what they're going through. And my parents were community people. They didn't skip over anybody because their clothes didn't smell right, or their hair weren't pressed hard enough, or so forth and so on. They were really committed to humanity, as were most of the people in their little small church there in that town. And it felt good. It felt good. And that feeling of wanting other people to feel good, I think, was part of our upbringing. You be nice to people because it's nice to be nice. And you'll feel nicer if you are nice to people, because it will come back to you. And so it was part of the upbringing as a child, and I never, ever feel alone. I mean, at age, I think I was 19, when I was selected to do an international field study through USAID's training program. And I told my mom I was going to get to go to Africa. She said, Africa? What does that mean? Most people in the 1960s, most black people in the 1960s couldn't imagine where the continent of Africa was unless they had had some kind of really good geography training. And we don't do that very well generally in America. But when I told her I was going to be on a plane and how long it's going to take to get there and all this, she was very, very worried. But I had no fear. I had absolutely no fear about going someplace to meet people. And I think that was because growing up, we just had so many people in our lives that were just met, because my parents were helping somebody. They spending the night in our house or coming over for Sunday dinner or this, that, and the other. They weren't related to us necessarily. So I saw the world as a place where you could build community with people that were not necessarily your family members, but they could become, extended family members. And it was a good thing to have a full network of people. Yeah. So I try to carry that over into the classes I teach in African American Studies. Many of our students now are urban students, not necessarily from a rural community like I came from. But urban people also need to build a sense of community so that they can have the support they need when trouble comes, or when joy comes, or celebration comes. It's just nice to have nice people around who know you and want to help out. Yeah.
The pictures I brought which signify the importance of my going into education are one of my grandfather, John Prince, and the little guy in front is me with my dog, whose name I don't remember, and my aunt Corinne, who was the first person in our family to attend college and graduate. She attended Howard University, and I would follow in her footsteps. Again, it's important to note that, again, as I followed my aunt's footsteps into Howard University, was my second university. I first attended Ohio University on a track and field scholarship while I was waiting to get a theater scholarship from Howard, which I was able to obtain. Howard had been my dream because it's our family university. I wanted to make my aunt proud of me. She would go on to become a social worker. She graduated from the School of Social Work and became the head social worker head of the system in the state of Illinois. And then also for a while worked as an assistant to Ralph Bunche and to Adlai Stevenson, who was the governor of Illinois. My grandfather's importance is a little different to me, and for another reason. My grandfather was a cook. He was out of Tennessee, not a formal education at all, started as an elevator operator in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the place I was raised after we moved from Tennessee, and became a chef. My grandfather was an inspiration because in his furthest imagination, he could never imagine me, one, either holding a degree or being in charge of a classroom that was integrated. We used to laugh in his last days the fact that He could not believe that I, as a black American, had the power of my grade book. I actually could fail white people if I wanted to, which came to an inside joke. But again, in his imagination, that was not conceivable during the time he was coming up. So he became an inspiration of the working class. He struggled, he worked hard to put my aunt through school. She struggled and worked hard to put me through school. And now I have the luxury of being able to put my children through school. So that was a legacy that was established some time ago. I went into the field of theater, not because anyone else in my family had gone into theater. I was inspired by my mother to continue to follow a dream. I guess I never wanted to grow up. I had this Peter Pan syndrome. And where the rest of my family said, you should do something practical. Why be a business major? Why not do something else that's meaningful? My mother said no. Not only follow your dreams, catch up to them. And I did just that. I went into theater at the age of 8, became a professional actor with a union card at 12, where I joined the national tour of A Raisin in the Sun as Travis, a little boy. And then from there, I would just continue my education in theater. I would continue my professional life in theater. I guess one of the most proudest moments in my theatrical career is that I was one of the founding members of the famed Negro Ensemble Company out of New York City. When it first started, I was one of the founding members, which was the vanguard of the black theater movement in this country. I had a chance to work with Amir Baraka during that time, Ed Bullins. I was right there in the midst of all these giants of black theater, the black theater movement from its beginning. I was able to sit down with Ron Karinga when he was coming up and started to develop Kwanzaa. I happened to be in that mix at the same time. I was in the Republic of New Africa as a minister of culture during those days. Stokely Carmichael Kwame, also who come out of Howard, was a good friend. As a matter of fact, my anecdote is, for a short time, my roommate in college was H. Rap Brown. I had 2 roommates. H. Rap Brown was one, Donnie Hathaway was another. Roberta Flack was my music teacher. So I came along at an excellent time. I was part of Howard University in the late 60s, 1969, when student unrest was there. We were taking over the college, making our voices heard. So again, politically and socially, I had the luck of the draw. I came along at a great time, and I was able to use my art as a platform for social change and differences. I'm still very much active and I'm part of the Black Theater movement. I'm a founding member of the Black Theater Network, which is still in function. Ethel Pitts Walker, who was my mentor and who brought me to San Jose State, and a dear friend, was a part of that. We were both in the first beginnings of the Black Theater movement. We were on the board together at the very beginning. So I had these chances to have opportunities to be sort of a founding father. I mean, then I was very young. I was this young guy fresh out of college, and now I'm somewhere being close to the ancestors. So I'm an elder now. I don't know when that happened, but I've gone from being a new kid on the block to one of the elders, because I'm still doing what I love, which is theater, and particularly black theater. And many opportunities to go and do commercial theater and just social theater. I really kept my commitment to black theater. Although I do all types of theater, and I would like to be known as a professional theater director, not a professional black theater director, but I am involved and committed to black theater staying alive and being very important and vibrant in America for young people to look at. We get a chance to tell the stories. We get a chance to tell the stories of our past. We get to create and reenact stories of our present. And we get to also write and create stories for our future. Theater is very powerful because we get the opportunity, and my motto has been to tell the truth of people's lives, and especially to be a mirror and a platform for the black experience in America and beyond. So that's my commitment. I teach young people. They say people who teach don't do. That's a lie. I do. I teach. I am theater.
My name is Professor Samuel Obi. I work with the Department of Aviation and Technology, where I teach manufacturing systems. I'm also the coordinator of technology programs in the department. The items I brought with me are the Bible, my 2 books. One is my dissertation titled Factors Influencing Minority Enrollment in Vocational Technical Education Programs in the state of Iowa. And the other is my latest book, Introduction to Manufacturing Systems, which is a textbook that my students use. I've been with San Jose State University since 1989. I'll be clocking 28 years at the end of this semester.
How important is your faith in your work?
Yeah, my faith is very important to me and what I do at San Jose State University. In terms of helping to mold my students as much as I can to become fully functioning individuals while they are here and when they graduate, in helping us to build this great society. It has also helped me to develop other books. One of my books is called A Handbook of Productive Industrial Ethics, which was written to help our students and industry practitioners to know how to follow the rules of their jobs, wherever they are, so that we can be more productive in industry. I came to America in 1979, September, and started schooling in Oklahoma State University, and later on at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, where I did my master's. I did my doctorate at the University of Northern Iowa, from where I was hired to be here at San Jose State. I have a family of 6, my wife and 4 children. Yes, the youngest is 23 now. The oldest is 31, just turned 31. And she's married with our 2 grandchildren now. I have 1 son and 3 daughters. All of them are engaged in the workforce. One works for SJSU Monterey as a graduate admissions coordinator. One works for Kaiser, and the other works for Santa Clara County as a nurse.
Okay. Lastly, read for us your favorite passage, Matthew, and once you read it, tell us why that's important.
Of course, these are some of my favorite passages, not all of them. The first one is Proverbs 14, chapter 14, verse 34. Godliness makes a nation great, but sin is a disgrace to any people. This is a favorite of mine because of what I saw in America when I first came to this country 30 plus years ago. And what I'm seeing now, that we see kind of degrading in values these days versus when I first came. And I believe that if we sustain that level of value we had in those days, this nation will be stronger and stronger as it was intended to be. The other one is found in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. I think I know it offhand. It's seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these other things will be added to us. This is especially good for young people who are looking for everything immediately. This passage tells us that the first thing is to remember our God who made us. This nation is a Christian nation. We have to remind our children that when we remember our God, he will take care of our other needs, including our education and whatever, jobs and so forth.
And lastly, you mentioned having read the Bible how many times?
I don't know how many, but basically every year, we read the Bible once, over once, from Genesis to Revelation. Well, that's a tradition we have in my house. And my children, when they got admitted to college, the best gift I always gave them was a Bible. I bought them one of those 1-year Bibles. And I urge them to read it every day. There's a portion every day that you read. And by the end of the year, you have finished the whole Bible. In fact, this morning, I read my own inside the train as I was coming to work. Today is online, you can get it on your cell phone.
My mother played the most significant role in my life simply because she always taught me to believe in a higher power. I grew up during the time where racism was prevalent, and I did not understand why people of color were treated the way they were treated. So I would go to my mother and would ask her, well, why can't I do certain things, or why can't we do certain things in life? And my mother always reminded me that I'm a child of God. And she said that as long as I believe in the 23rd Psalms, and she would told me to memorize the 23rd Psalms, to study it, and within the 23rd Psalms, I will find the answers to life. And so basically, when I was in high school, I knew that I was getting ready to leave home, and the 23rd Psalms, I knew the words, but it didn't really have significant meaning to me because I was still young, impressionable, and when you're a child, you think that you know more than your parents or whatever. But it wasn't until I left home and I went to college and I struggled going through college, I realized, okay, there's something about what my mother packed me with as far as leaving home. Now, she didn't give me money, she gave me something in my heart, and that is the 23rd Psalms, and also the incredible belief that she instilled in me as far as believing in God. So it wasn't until I went to college that I had to rely and lean on those teachings, those early teachings. And by the way, my father was a minister. And so between my mother and father, that was something that was near and dear to my heart, and that's the belief in God. By the time I graduated from an undergraduate, I went for my master's degree, subsequently for my doctorate degree, and I was working in academia all my life. But again, I had to think about the 23rd Psalms because I was in an unfriendly environment. Even to this very day, I think about the 23rd Psalms. There are 6 verses in the 23rd Psalms, and I have them written and inked in my heart. It's because it's not an easy path going through academia, knowing that it is definitely difficult for African Americans in higher education. I had to put into my heart and my spirit, even to this very day, that I have to continue to move forward and not look back. At San Jose State University, I have to read the 23rd Psalms. It's because I do walk through the shadows of the valley of death. And what that simply means is not literally, but there are a lot of people that try to stop you in higher education. Whether it's your inspiration to publish, whether it's your inspiration to perhaps get into a better position or a higher position, there's those people that will try to stop you. But I realized as a part of the 23rd Psalms that my rod and my staff, they comfort me. The rod and the staff simply means to me is the Bible, what carries me in life are the beliefs that my parents had given me. This flower, for an example, this flower represents the day that my mother died. She died in January of 1996, and this is all she left me, along with this Bible. This Bible is a family heirloom. This Bible was given to my great-grandmother and was passed down to me. And of all my siblings, I ended up with this Bible. And in this Bible, my mother said, never forget the 23rd Psalms. And as I hold this flower, that's 26 years, excuse me, not 26, but since 1996, this is what I was put on my mother's breast while she laid in the coffin. and I took it off of her breast, and I kept this as a symbol. And I said, I will keep this flower, this precious flower, the last thing that I remembered my mother having on her breastbone. I took that and I put it in the Bible, and I stuck it right there, the 23rd Psalms, and I said, I'll never ever forget it.
Education has always been huge in my family. I was born in Guyana, South America. Guyana is a little country on the northeastern coast of South America. And I spent my first 18 years there until I left for college. In my family, there was nothing more important than education, nothing. I remember my dad saying to me one day, Angela, all you have to do is study hard and do well at school. That's your job. Nothing else. And it struck a chord with me because I had nothing else to do, literally. I didn't do chores around the house. You know, my parents just wanted us to take in our education. I was the third of 4 girls, and my dad and mom just did everything they could to give us the best education. And so I grew up with that value ingrained in me. And we went to a very good high school. It was called the Bishop's High School for Girls. And it wasn't easy to get admitted to the school, so to make sure I got in, my dad paid for me to get extra lessons, and I did score enough on the main test. There's a test you have to do at the age of 10 or 11. It's called the 10 plus. And depending on how well you do on that test, you get sent to a high school in the country. And the best high school was what everybody aimed for. And I wanted to get to Bishop's, and that's where I got. So once there, I studied hard, and I liked studying. My family used to call me Books. My nickname was Books because I read so much and studied so hard. And eventually in high school, I sat the advanced level GCE. That was an exam that was actually sent to Cambridge University and the University of London in England to be graded because our country was originally a colony. And I did Latin, history, and English at advanced levels, and I passed them all. And I got a scholarship to do my first degree at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. So I did that degree, and that when I was finished, I got another scholarship to do a doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania. I was telling Moses, I did my final exam on a Wednesday, traveled on a Thursday, arrived in the U.S. on Friday, and got married on Saturday. It was June the 19th. 1971, and my mother made my wedding dress, and the first time I saw my wedding dress was when I wore it on Saturday morning to my wedding. That's how good she was at making my clothes. From the time of my birth until I left home for college at the age of 18, my mom sewed every single garment I wore. My school uniforms every year, the dresses I wore in the afternoon, the pants I wore, every single thing was made by my mom. And when I was leaving for college, she sewed me, what was almost a trousseau, she sewed me a suitcase of clothes for me to wear at college. And that's what I wore at college. So the first time I wore a garment that was ready-made that I went into the store and bought was after I got married at the age of 22. Up till then, I wore only the clothes my mother made. And so when I was getting ready for this series, Dr. Cherry said to me, well, do you have a garment that she made that you could bring? And so I dug around the house and found that blouse that I absolutely loved to wear. It fitted me like a glove, like all the clothes she made. But there was something about the colors in that blouse that I always liked. And so I kept it, and I found it hidden away in a bottom drawer in my bedroom. We then went on to build the value of education in our own family. And my children went on to understand how important that was. When we came to the U.S., to live, we had only about $100 between us, my husband and I. Because when we left Guyana, we were both lecturers at the University of Guyana, and the government didn't want us to leave the country. But when Stanford offered my husband a position, we thought, well, we should at least come and try it. And so in order to make sure we came back, they didn't let us leave with our assets. So we came with only about $100, and we've now been here 80, we've now been here 37 years. And we managed to give our children an excellent education. The point I'm making is that it's what you have inside of you that counts, not the external trappings, because we didn't have money. But my firstborn did a JD at UCLA. My second child is a professor at Cornell in history. My third child did a graduate program in psychotherapy. And my youngest, the baby, went to Harvard and then Stanford. And so we did all this with 4 children. We didn't have much money when we came. Of course, the financial situation improved over time because I got a job at San Jose State. My husband is a professor at Stanford. So it's gotten increasingly better. But we started with very little. Here at San Jose State, I'm a professor in the College of Education, in the Department of Special Education, and my area of expertise is literacy development, reading and writing. I have a book that I wrote, Teaching Reading and Comprehension to Ethnically Diverse Students. Literacy is the foundation of everything children do in school. And if you can't read and write, you pretty much can't do the other subjects. So I've always been really interested in literacy and in reading, and I've spent my entire career focusing on that. In fact, my research for my dissertation was conducted in East Palo Alto, California, which was at that time and still is a largely ethnic minority community.
I chose my mentor, Gordon Parks. I've kept Gordon Parks' picture in my office, every university that I worked at. I met Gordon Parks in 1971 when I was still in high school. The movie Shaft had just come out, and I met him at the premiere of Shaft at the Fox Theater in St. Louis, Missouri. I was familiar with Gordon through Life magazine, of course, and through his autobiography, the first installment on his autobiography, The Learning Tree. Gordon, at the premiere, I was a shy, teenager, and he was standing in the lobby signing autographs and talking to the press, and I walked up to him and I introduced myself as this little high school journalism student. And he answered whatever questions that I had, and then something just came out of my mouth. Can I have a phone number to keep in contact with you? And the man literally, he put out a piece of paper and wrote down his phone number. And we were tight from that day forth. Throughout my entire college career, working career, Gordon would critique my photos. He would offer advice. Fast forward when I was organizing my book, Songs of My People, I asked Gordon to write the introduction to it, and he did. And the picture that you see is a picture of Gordon with me at the opening of Songs of My People in New York at the Metropolitan Gallery. And so it was just a long friendship and mentorship. Gordon used to call me, and we would get together for dinner, and we would get together for lunch whenever I was in New York. I remember him calling me once during the middle of the week. I was living in D.C. at the time, and I asked, and he called, and he said, "Michael, what are you doing on Friday?" I said, "I don't know, nothing important." He said, "Why don't you take a train up, because I want to cook dinner for you. You know, I was blown away. It was Wednesday. I couldn't wait till Friday. And I took the train up, went and got 2 of the best bottles of wine that we used to share. And Gordon and I just sat and talked well into the wee hours of Friday night, Saturday morning. And he was showing me some of his advanced work and so forth. And so it was, you know, that's why that picture means so much. Later on, when I was a faculty fellow at National Geographic magazine, I was out one day shooting. It happened to be Independence Day. And I saw this picture in Washington, D.C. that to me looked like Gordon's American Gothic that he shot back in the 40s when he was with the Foreign Security Administration. And that's the other picture that I have in my office, like the one of Gordon and I at the Metropolitan Gallery. So a tremendous influence on my life, professionally and personally. I was so sad when he passed. In 2006, I believe, and it just happened to be spring break when I was teaching at the University of Mississippi, and I didn't even think. I immediately just got in my car, got the map to Fort Scott, Kansas, and I think drove 8 hours from Oxford, Mississippi to Fort Scott, you know, because I wanted to be there, you know, to really honor him in his passing. So, yeah, Gordon Parks, major influence on my life.
I'm Bob Rucker. I'm a former CNN correspondent. I've been teaching at San Jose State for 27 years. Quite a passion to be here. And I must say that being director of this school for 5 years was one of the highest moments because I got to lead one of the prominent programs in journalism that's recognized around the world for excellence in media education. That watch that I showed came from my father, who had it handed down to him from my grandfather, who came from a great uncle or so who worked in the railroad industry. And one of the things that the family tradition was, time controls the fabric of our lives. So be on time, but also look at time as a guide for the past, from the past to the future. Learn from the past through the times we've experienced, so that in the future you don't make the same mistakes. And most importantly, you can build on your successes if you are aware of where you came from. It's ironic, but when my father gave me that when I was a teenager, I hadn't really thought much about it. And then he kept it in storage, so I didn't think much more about it until later in life when he was about to die. And I gave it to him to say, "You sure you want me to have this?" And then he explained. He said, "Look at what you've done with your life." When he gave me that watch, he didn't know that I was going to open up a career in television journalism where time would be of essence. It would be the benchmark. It would be the demand, the pressure, the stress. All of it would come from time. But he said, remember the message. Learn from the past time. Use it in the future for the better. But time is your asset. Don't see it as your enemy.
My name is Emily Joyce Bruce, and the picture that you saw with me holding a diploma is the diploma I got from the University of California at Davis. The reason I'm holding that picture is because that diploma is because that is a symbol of my parents' commitment to education. I grew up in Sacramento, California. I was born in California, and my parents came to California from Texas and Kansas to have a better opportunity for their family. And their idea of a better opportunity was education. Their commitment was to raise all 4 of their children and send them to Catholic school. And when I was younger, my father would drive past Sac State and say, "You're going to go to college." And so by the time I got ready to go to college, I applied to the University of California at Davis, and not easily I got into that school, and I was successful. I liked it there. I enjoyed school. And I decided to stay there for an extra year, to which my mother said, "Yes, you can stay for another year, but you will have to pay for it." And so I did, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And when I finished school, I went back to work in Sacramento, working with children, much like my mother had when she was going to school. And then I realized I needed more education, and I went to the University of Washington in Seattle to the School of Social Work and got a Master's of Social Work, and came back to California. I got a job in Stockton, where I live now, and I worked for Child Protective Services. And I worked there for 10 years and decided that I needed to go back to school again. And I went to the University of California at Berkeley to get a PhD in social welfare. That was a challenge. I was older than most of the people there by about 10 years, but I finished successfully. While I was there, I was able to get a job at San Jose State as a lecturer in social work, and I became a full-time member of the faculty in the year 2002. I have enjoyed my stay and my time at San Jose State. It has been very challenging, very enjoyable. I love my colleagues. I love the students. The staff are amazing. That doesn't mean there are no problems here. There are problems. But the interesting thing about Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, is that there's an attitude that if there are things that are problems, you can get them done. You can work on it. There is no such word as no. It's not now. How can we get around it? How can we fix it? And that's what I like about this campus. Don't tell anyone. But this job here is the best job I've ever had.
My name is Stan Butler. I am an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology. I have been at San Jose State 27 years. I'm currently teaching classes in fitness nutrition, weight training, basketball. I brought along with me today what I like to refer to as my horse, but it's really my bike. I was actually got the spark of bike riding when I was a youngster, about 7 or 8 years old. A neighbor in my neighborhood who was 65 years old used to ride his bike through the neighborhood. He would always pop wheelies on his bike, and everybody knew that neighbor as Slick Ike. At any rate, I remember as a kid thinking, I want to be like that guy one day. So here I am, me and my bike, and we spend a lot of time together. Some of my best rides are the ride from home to school, 11 and a half miles to get to school and 11 and a half miles to go home at the end of the day. I don't think that's a whole lot when I think about a PBS special that they did on children from Kenya who would run 7.5 miles to school and 7.5 miles back home every day. So riding a bike, that's a lot easier, but it gives me an opportunity to practice what I teach/preach every day. And the two really are compatible. When you actually engage in a lot of the fitness stuff, you feel a whole lot better about sharing that with students because you know from your own experience it really has a lot of value for the individual. I'm currently, in fact, living in a community that has an average age of about 74. Very active people. And just being around individuals who have lived substantial lives, who are in their senior years, but they continue to live very active lives, Lots of individuals who come out and play tennis with us on a regular basis are in their 80s, and in fact, 2 or 3 of the people are in their 90s, and they still come out and they play tennis on a regular basis. I was born in Marianna, Arkansas. I was delivered into the world by my grandmother, who was a midwife. I grew up in Bowling Green, Missouri. After graduating from high school, I went on to undergraduate school at Culver Stockton College in Canton, Missouri. I played football and ran track at Culver Stockton College, graduated from Culver Stockton, and I went directly from Culver Stockton to Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana, where I earned my master's degree. After completing my master's degree, I went back and started my teaching career in Bowling Green, Missouri, where I grew up. I spent 4 years teaching at Bowling Green in the public schools, and at the end of 4 years, I took a job, accepted a job at Texas A&M University. So in 1981, I started teaching at Texas A&M University, and it was at Texas A&M University that I continued with work that I had started. My doctoral degree, I had started work on it at the University of Missouri at Columbia, where I had attended the University of Missouri for a couple of years. But when I accepted the position at Texas A&M to be full-time on the faculty, I went to school at night to work toward my doctorate. So when I completed my doctorate in 1989, that's when I accepted the position at San Jose State. I came to San Jose State in August of 1989, so I am currently in my 28th year.
I found this figurine while I was doing one of those perusals through a store that has so much stuff you can't see what's in there. There's one downtown on Santa Clara. And I came upon this statue, and I almost stumbled over myself getting it to the cash register, because who finds a figurine of a black teacher? I've never seen one before. And so I had to have it. It was my price, $3.65, and took it home.
$3.65.
Yes, sir. $3.65. And I thought, what a find. I would have paid $300 for it. And I was excited because you don't get to see black teachers modeled anywhere. And I grew up in a school where before junior high, it was a traditional African American community school. I don't like to call them segregated schools anymore. It was a community school in southeast Missouri, in what's called the Boot Heel, Sikeston, Missouri. And of course, we had black teachers. All of our teachers were African American. It was sitting in the middle of the black community. And this represents my favorite teacher, Mrs. Agnes Maxwell. I had her in the 5th grade, and I wanted to grow up to be just like her. She always had her hair fried, dyed, and laid to the side. She always was dressed impeccably. She was stern with us, but we knew she loved us, so we worked for her. And so I would look at her and think, I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to look like her, you know. And so she greatly inspired me to teach. All of the people there did. We had teachers from Fisk, from Arkansas A&M, and also from Lincoln University at Jefferson City. Those are the 3 feeder schools. And what was such a great experience is that they lived in the black community. We were an extremely poor community, but the teachers were migrants. They came there for 9 months. They would find rooms in the community, and they would live there in homes, and then they would go back home in the summertime. And so it was a very intimate relationship because they knew our families. They went to church with us. You know, they saw us running up and down the street in the afternoon. And it would be kind of scary sometimes when one of the teachers would talk to my mother. I was afraid she was going to tell us something I had done. You know, so it was very intimate. We knew them. Our parents knew them. So if Miss Payton said Marquita was doing so and so in class, my mother had no question about that. You know, because she knew who Miss Payton was. She knew where she lived, and Mrs. Maxwell. All of these people. Not only did they teach me in the classroom, but I also took piano lessons from two of the teachers. For a while, my mother didn't have money to pay for piano lessons. And so my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Scott, she asked me one day in homeroom, she says, "Why aren't you taking piano lessons?" I said, "Well, my mom said, we can't afford that no more. We ain't got no more money." She said, "Where there's a will, there's a way. And if you want to take piano lessons, I will give them to you during homeroom class." I said, "All right." So during homeroom, while the other students were supposed to be studying, I was taking the piano lesson. And I just made contact with a guy on Facebook who told me, "I'm one of those people who used to listen to you play your lessons in homeroom class." He said, "And I can't read music," he said, "but I can play by ear. And I would play what you played that I heard in homeroom." That just blew me out of the water.
And how many years ago was that?
At least 50.